What's up, everyone? So for this section of moves, we're gonna be focused on the upper body and specifically contralateral exercises. So we're gonna focus on working either the upper body while also driving with the opposite side of the lower half, or working a press and row motion simultaneously. It's gonna be really good for oblique slings, core integration, and really just being a better athlete. So check these out. First, we got the single arm bench press. You can also do this with both arms, but you're gonna do this bench press variation with the opposite knee driving up into a 90-degree angle. So you're creating some hip flexion and knee drive with the left leg if you're pressing with the right side. So you're getting that contralateral activation, ton of core integration here. This is a great exercise to do in the second or third set, more of an accessory lift, more in the C and D range after you've done your big chest exercises. But this is gonna light up your core, make sure that you're driving into your heel with the foot that is on the ground, and then driving the opposite knee up while you're pressing either with one arm or with both arms. Next, we got the single arm row with the opposite side doing a bird dog variation. So you're extending that leg back, getting a glute activation, ton of core integration here as well. Really make sure that you're not finding extension in the lower back and extending through that lumbar spine. Make sure that your spine stays neutral. That opposite leg is kicked back while you're pressing that hand into the bench and rowing with the other side. So you're gonna be rowing with your right side while your left glute and left hip is getting activated. And then when you flip, you're gonna do it on the left side and the right leg. All right, so for this press and band row combination, you're gonna wanna find something up high to anchor a band so that you can be pulling down while you simultaneously press. And this is gonna mimic the motion of running where you're driving with one side and retracting with the other side. On the back side, the shoulder blades are also gonna be working contralaterally, so you're getting a lot of really good integration left to right and getting really good movement throughout the entire rib cage. All right, so for this row and knee drive, you're gonna either want to row with a cable or a band, set it up in the high row position. While you work the upper body in that row motion, the opposite hip is going to knee drive. So you're gonna finish in a sprinter position, and you're gonna really wanna make sure that as you're reaching for that row and go into that knee drive, there's a hinge in your torso. So you should feel on the same side that you're rowing, let's say you're rowing with that right arm, as you drive into that right side, get that left side up, you should be feeling your right glute and your right side, your right lat, and everything on the right side working together while the left hip flexor drives up into that 90-degree angle with the ankle being in that 90-degree angle. It's gonna work the upper body in the row pattern, but you're also gonna get a lot of hip drive and sprinter type, running type activation throughout the entire body. Really good for integrating the core and just athletic movement patterns in general. All right, so for these upper body moves, there's gonna be a lot of core activation, especially working into the obliques on the anterior or front side of your body. So you're gonna wanna make sure that as you're doing this, you're activating not only your glutes, but you're using your breath and really driving with exhales. So every time you're exerting force, you wanna make sure that you're driving the rib cage down in that exhale pattern. That way you're gonna help make sure that the front side of your core and glutes are staying active and you're not just hinging in the low back, creating a little bit of pain here. Keep in mind, these aren't exercises you're supposed to go super heavy on, but they are excellent ways to really spice up basic variations of bench presses and of rows and really get the core involved. So for this first variation, you're gonna have half of your body. Basically think about your body being split in half. Half of it is on the bench, half of it is off. You're gonna be bench pressing as you usually would, but as you're doing this, you're having to recruit your entire left or right side of your oblique to prevent you from rotating. This is an anti-rotation based exercise, and it's excellent to use in combination both on right and left together in some sort of superset, or you can use it later in the workout after you've done some of the bigger compound lifts for your chest, for your back, and just upper body in general. Next, we got the glute bridge bench press. You can set this up a number of different ways. You can use a box, you can use the floor, you can use a bench. But the big thing you wanna make sure here is that as you are pressing, you're not pressing with extension in that lower back and really flaring that rib cage out to get that weight up. really think about making sure that this is weight that you can control. Drive your heels into the ground, get a good glute activation, but keep the rib cage down so you can keep your rib cage stacked over your pelvis. If you can do that and then press and drive with your arms, shoulders, and upper body, that's gonna really make sure that you're executing this exercise in the best manner possible. All right, so for this high plank row, you're actually going to be up on your toes. So think about being on the top of a push-up, and then you can change the angle a number of different ways here. I recommend being at around a 30, 40, 45 degree angle so that you can drive either your left or right arm into the bench, into something that is elevated, and then you're rowing with the opposite side. So this is very much an anti-rotation core exercise, but you're getting the row element. You can think of this as being a renegade row variation, but I really like to make sure that you're doing just one side at a time. And obviously if you're in a high plank, you can't be alternating. So that's why I like this one a little bit more than a renegade row. You can really focus on creating stability on one side, rowing on the other side, and it's probably gonna save you a little bit on your hands and grip as well. All right, so for this set of exercises, we're gonna find some shoulder-friendly combinations for the upper body. Shoulders are one of the biggest and first things to get banged up, especially for fellas that just hammer upper body exercises. Speaking to you, bench pressers. So really make sure that you incorporate these shoulder-friendly exercises, either when you notice your shoulders flaring up, or just to mix it up and keep some good variation in there. This first one is the Serrano press, and this is a great exercise to use either in some sort of warm-up to really activate and warm up the shoulders, or you can do it towards the end of your session to really burn out the rear side of your upper back and shoulders. So when you're doing this, you really want to make sure that as you face pull, then press overhead, you're pressing overhead with a exhale. If you press overhead and you just find low back extension, you're gonna be cheating here. What we're trying to create is that face pull motion, but then as you press up overhead, every inch you go up higher makes that fulcrum and that lever point harder and harder and harder to maintain. But you're getting really good upward rotation of the scapula, and this is gonna help from a mobility standpoint, but also from a shoulder health standpoint. It's gonna bulletproof your shoulders. You're gonna definitely feel the burn. They're definitely gonna be tough. One other thing that I'd have you consider trying as well is staggering your stance. That'll help make sure that you're not hinging again in that low back or even in the thoracic, and make sure that everything's coming from the shoulder blades, the shoulders, and then the elbows, especially as you're pulling back. All right, so this next one, we've got the floor press, and this one seems pretty simple, but I never really see people using it at the gym, and it's one of my favorite chest exercises. First and foremost, you don't need any equipment outside of the dumbbells or the kettlebells that you're using. So if the benches are all being used by a bunch of jabronis, you can just go on the floor and do a shoulder-friendly version of a bench press. Why is it shoulder-friendly? Well, because the floor stops you from going beyond any range of motion, beyond just 90 degrees. So you actually get that feedback from the floor there, and then once you hit the floor, then you're driving back up. Big mistake I see a lot of people make is they're going way too deep, almost creating internal rotation in that shoulder, and it's just creating more tension and more pain in that front side of the shoulder. And so if you really focus on that floor press, as soon as those triceps tap down, coming back up, you're actually gonna notice that you feel a lot more tension in the triceps, in the chest, and in the shoulders as well, as opposed to just sitting and bouncing in your ligaments and in your joints. All right, so for this seated neutral grip cable row, you're gonna wanna sit at the base of wherever you'd be doing some sort of pull-up variation or with the cables. So you can set up bands up above your head or you can do the cables, but you're actually gonna wanna sit down completely here, directly underneath the weight that you're gonna be pulling down. And then if you can do like a crisscross applesauce or just keep your legs in front of you, this is gonna be a really good way to have a lot of core integration. But what it also does is it gets your shoulders up over your head, and then you're pulling straight down in a much more shoulder-friendly way, because you can change the angle slightly versus having it be directly overhead. And for a lot of people, because they can't go overhead with the shoulder mobility, shoulder flexion particularly, they have to find that in their low back. But if you're sitting down and you can change the angle just a little bit to be able to pull straight down, and then that neutral grip is gonna be shoulder friendly as well, rather than having you just in a ton of internal rotation. Because you have the freedom of the bands or of the handles with the cable, you can track a little bit more smoothly as you pull down. I also really like to just let my arms hang up and just let that weight pull me up. Feels like a really good stretch and really good just decompression of the spine as well. So try that out maybe before your set or at the end of your sets, but try this one as a variation of some sort of lat machine pull down, of some sort of pull up, some sort of chin up, and I think you'll find that it's really good on the shoulders. All right, so for this exercise, the half kneeling single arm shoulder press, a lot of people struggle to press overhead. If you follow any of my content, you'll see me talking all the time about keeping the rib cage stacked over the pelvis and really exhaling into the motion. So many people don't have access to a full overhead press, and so a shoulder press variation where it's just one arm makes it a little bit easier to get there. You really want to make sure as you're doing this, you're staying stacked. You can either find a half kneeling position, a seated position, or a double kneeling position. But regardless of what you do, take that arm, rotate it in so that the elbow is almost in front of your pec and press up this way. It's gonna find a similar motion to if you were doing like a single arm landmine press, which is a great variation for a shoulder press variation. It's a little bit more at an incline, but if you're doing a single arm dumbbell or kettlebell version of this, it's gonna be a little bit easier to go overhead. Exhale as you're pressing up overhead, keep that rib cage down, and you're gonna be able to work the shoulders as you would in a shoulder press in a much safer and I would say stronger way as well. You're getting a ton of core integration as you're doing this. And if you find either a kneeling, half kneeling, or seated position doing this, you're gonna be able to take out a lot of what would be lower back help, for lack of a better term. Anytime you do a standing shoulder press or even a seated shoulder press on a bench, you can sometimes find yourself start to creep and cheat, and it ends up turning into an incline press, but it's not meant to be. So this is gonna be something that helps you stay in that position. You can't really lean back any further, otherwise you'd fall over. So try this out as a shoulder pressing variation. I think you'll love what you find. All right, so for this next section, we got some plyometrics and really just some explosive central nervous system activating exercises. So as you're doing these, think of these as things that you wanna do in more of a powerful, high force scenario. So this is gonna be something that you're doing from an activation going into a big compound lift like a bench press, but it could also be something that you're doing in between sets to really activate and prime a little bit more neural drive activation of different muscle fibers, and really making sure that you are getting as much from a strength component as possible. Anytime you can incorporate plyometrics or just explosive base movements, it's gonna be something that can really help your numbers from a bench press standpoint, from a row standpoint, and these variations, either with your body weight or with medicine balls, are great ways to do that because you can apply a ton of force because it's just your body weight or a 10 to 15 pound medicine ball. All right, so for these plyo box push-ups, I like to really use these towards the end of a workout or in a superset with another chest-based exercise. What you're able to do is you're able to go into a deficit with a little bit more range of motion, but you gotta control it. So this is gonna be something that if you struggle with mobility or you're not able to do, maybe go really small on your deficit and work your way up with this. So go from like maybe even an inch, like a 25 pound plate, maybe even a 10 pound plate, and then work your way up. But what this is gonna allow you to do is get a little bit deeper. You're gonna have to control that eccentric and then be explosive to press yourself up out from between the plyo boxes up onto the plyo boxes. So you're getting a really good combination of absorbing the force and then producing a lot of explosive force as well. All right, so for this incline plyo push-up, I love to use this going into a bench press, going into a shoulder press, or going into any kind of upper body exercise that I really wanna make sure that I prime and activate my central nervous system and really get the muscles that I'm gonna be using that exercise ready to rock. So if you're doing an incline plyo press, because you're at an incline, it's so much easier to be explosive. You're basically cutting your weight in half and making it so that you don't have to do a plyo push-up with your body weight. Because you're at an incline, you're able to go and produce a lot more force. And so I would do something just like 5 to 8, 2 rounds of that, and then you're gonna be ready to go, and you're gonna feel so much better going into your bigger lifts immediately after. All right, so for this medicine ball floor slam, all you're gonna do is just take a medicine ball that ideally bounces back to you. You're just gonna hinge at the waist, almost like you would for a bent over row, and then you're just slamming that ball into the floor. And as soon as you catch it, keep slamming, keep slamming, keep slamming. This is all concentric based components of that push. So it's gonna be something that either does a really good job of activating you pre-exercise, or sometimes I'll go and throw this as an exercise to really rev up my heart rate and use it maybe in a little bit more of a circuit. Certainly you can do any kind of side slams or any kind of slams into the wall, but if you just bend over, hinge, chest press into the floor, you're gonna activate a ton of muscle fibers. You're gonna get the heart rate going, you're gonna get the nervous system firing, and you're gonna be ready to go. All right, for this med ball wall slam, I love this simply because I get to feel like I get to just throw heavy things into the wall and let out some of my anger, let out some of my frustration. There's a couple different ways you can execute this. You can be in a static position with your feet planted and you're just constantly chest pressing into the wall, or you can really walk up or even slightly run up into this and really focus on creating as much force and as much power as you can and projecting that ball into the wall. So you can utilize this in a couple different ways. You can use this to prep your CNS going into some sort of big lift. You can also use this as a power-based exercise where you're really focusing on how much power and force you can put into that ball and ultimately into the wall. That's gonna translate into a number of different sports where you really need to create that force in a specific direction. All right, it is Bana protocol time, and this is one of my favorite ways to get a massive pump, feel pretty sore after the workout, but it's really good at helping develop muscle. And so everything that you're gonna be doing is going to be bilateral assisted, negative accentuated. All that means is that you're gonna do the concentric with 2 arms, and you're gonna allow 1 arm to do the negative. The body can do more, muscles can do more in the eccentric, in the negative, than they can in the concentric. So because you're able to bring up maybe a dumbbell with both arms, now when you go to lower it down, you're working that eccentric 3, 4, 5 seconds, and that's gonna be something that creates a ton of muscle damage, but also helps the body create more hypertrophy, more lean muscle tissue, especially when the nutrition's dialed in. And this is gonna be something that you can utilize to really mix up what is typically boring exercises and use some heavier weights, which is super fun. So for Bana curls, there's a number of different ways that you can use this setup. One of the most simple ones is to find a dumbbell that would typically be something that you could maybe do 3, 4 times maybe, but you're going to bring it up and then you're gonna lower it down with 1 arm. Grab it with the left, lift up with the right, lower it down with the right. Now you can use this with dumbbells, you can use this with machines, you can use this with cables. It doesn't really matter what you're doing, but you just wanna make sure that you're increasing that weight 30, 40% so that it's something that you can handle in the negative, but need 2 arms to come up with in the concentric version of the exercise. So for Bana tricep extensions, same concept as a bicep Bana exercise. You're going to do some sort of press down with both arms or tricep extension with both arms, and then you're gonna let 1 arm slowly bring it back up. So if you're doing an overhead tricep extension, you might go all the way over with 2 hands and then slowly bring it back with 1. Again, you're really trying to control it on that eccentric component. You're gonna feel a ton of soreness the next day in your triceps, but that's all good stuff. That's all helping to build muscle in that targeted muscle. All right, the close grip chin up. You can also do this as a close grip seated row, but what's great about this is that it is something that you can handle with 2 hands and bring in with 1, and it really mimics and matches the angle at which your joints would be already. So rather than having like a lat machine pull down where you're coming down and it's really hard to balance on just that right side, everything's really centered, so that center of force, that center of gravity is gonna be already in line with what you're doing. It's gonna be a little bit easier. You're gonna have a little bit more of a lever and mechanical advantage as you're bringing that weight in. So load it up, 2 arms bring it in, 2 arms pull it down, 1 arm brings it back up. It's gonna be a great exercise to help really build and develop your back, your lats, and everything else on the upper body, especially on the backside.